Good evening and welcome to our webinar. This is a webinar on advancing understanding on Blastic, Plasmacytoid dendritic cell neoplasm, or BPDCN in short, and empowering patients through knowledge. This is a webinar hosted by Cancer Patients Europe. My name is Antonella Cardone, and I'll be your moderator for today's event. And we are very happy that you joined us today. So I will introduce you very briefly to CPE. So Cancer Patients Europe is a pan-European all-cancer type patient association. We work on several issues, including policy, research, and advocacy. Our membership is constantly growing, and currently we have 53 members from 26 countries, including the US and Canada. At CPE, we are committed to supporting patients with rare cancers, and BPDCN is a particular focus for us due to its rarity and the unique challenges it presents. And we believe that knowledge is power. And so with this webinar, we wanted to create a moment to empower patients and caregivers with the information that they need. The agenda for today is, as you can see on my screen, we have put together a panel of very high level of experts at international level on BPDCN, including Dr. Marco Herrling, who is a senior physician at the University Hospital of Leipzig and professor at UOC, as a specialist in international medicine and hematology and oncology. He oversees the scientific and clinical program in mature T-cell leukemias. And Dr. Eric de Koning, Chief of the Hematology Service at Besançon University Hospital in France, and Professor of Clinical Hematology at the University of Franche-Comté of Besançon. And is also head of the Cancerology Department in the same hospital. We also have listed here Dr. Christina Metteldorf. Unfortunately, for health reasons, she cannot join us today. We have also among our team today, among our speakers, a patient, Ivano Fonseca. Is a patient of BPDCN with an epi end. And we really thank him for sharing his personal experience with us today. Then we also have some information. We have video messages from 3 members of the European Parliament. So from Vytenis Andriukaitis, Tomislav Sokol, and Nicolas Gonzalez. And then we will have an update on our work on BPDCN from Dr. Juan José Ventura. And a Q&A, a very short Q&A session. So we have a very intense hour today together. So now I give the floor to Dr. Marco Herling to set the scene, to explain, to introduce us what BPDCN is and what the major challenges with BPDCN are. Thank you. So the floor to you, Marco.
Thank you, Antonella, and thank you for helping putting this together and including Eric, myself, and others to help advancing systematic programs of raising awareness and empowering patients on both sides, raising awareness among colleagues, physicians, caretakers, and patients, but also, as we focus on today, on empowering patients, which is mainly through knowledge, through education of what networks, which doctors we have available, which treatments we have available, what the natural course, natural presentations of the disease is, and how you can connect with others, with networks. I'd like to have the first slide, please. And to pick everybody up, I'll try in simple terms to introduce you within the next 2-3 minutes to the disease before we then engage in the other items of our agenda, which will then, I guess, culminate in an opportunity for everybody to discuss together with my esteemed colleague, Dr. Deconin, who you see here in the video. Him and myself will lead the panel discussion, I think, that is open for all kinds of questions. The terminology, which I think the name is hard to pronounce, BPDCN, Blastic, Plasmacytoid, Dendritic cell neoplasm. The name says it is a neoplasm, a malignant disease. However, for the longest time, people did not know what the cell of origin actually is. They thought of it as being a lymphoma deriving from lymphocytes. They thought of it then being a myeloid disease, another branch of the hematopoietic system, similar to acute myeloid leukemia, before eventually people found out that it stems from a dendritic cell type, and dendritic cells are either professional antigen presenting cells with important roles in immunity, in defense against infectious invasions, but also against viral agents by secreting cytokines like interferons. And so dendritic cells are now firmly established as the cell type of origin of BPDCN. And they have a tendency to home, which means to move and proliferate and rest in the skin. And this is the current teaching. They seem to be exposed for longer than average to UV light, which creates DNA damages in the DNA nucleic acids of the dendritic cell. And this damage is then makes the cell cancer prone. And through multiple steps of genetic changes, the cell becomes malignant, which means autonomous. It no longer belongs, follows rules and regulations of when and how to grow. It, meaning the disease BPDCN, usually affects older individuals, but there's also a pediatric subpopulation. And with older, I mean a median age of about 66 years. The incidence, as typical for a very rare disease, is very low. If you take the yearly new diagnoses in US and Europe combined, you have about 1,000 to 1,400 new diagnoses per year. And I attempt to speculate that probably the number of misdiagnosed or undiagnosed BPDCNs might be a bit higher. Overall, when you look at the statistics of 0.44% of all blood cancers, you soon realize, well, if it's that rare even amongst hematologic diseases, blood cancers, then even the large volume centers, academic centers, university hospitals probably don't see them very often, and which means you will have a hard time finding so-called experts. Next slide, please. Because experts are people who have the trained eye and the trained logistics around them, treating these patients and recognizing them diagnostically. And that takes some time of your career to accumulate experience with a number of patients that you have diagnosed and treated with BPDCN. So the nature of the disease infrequently is it presenting with skin lesions. And these skin lesions are per se not in their appearance typical, but what they have in common, they often look like bruise-like lesions, hematomas of various ages. However, whether they localize to certain body parts, whether they are single lesions or multiple or generalized lesions, this all can occur in BPDCN, so there's no typical distribution pattern. What's typical is this bruise-like appearance, as I said. There's only a few patients who don't present with initial skin lesions when having BPDCN, about 10%. Most of them, 90%, present with skin lesions. And then in decreased frequency, these patients show signs of involvement of visceral organs, mostly lymph nodes, spleen, and liver, in about 50% of cases. And also the bone marrow is frequently involved in the peripheral blood, which then makes it overall a hematologic disease. It's not a skin cancer. It's always to be understood as a hematologic, and we say systemic disease. So it's spread throughout your body by involving the bone marrow and the blood. You can, but it's not obligatory, feel or have symptoms like fever, weight loss, or night sweats, which your doctor usually calls constitutional symptoms. And then the next slide, please. The diagnostic criteria, as we have them right now, as of today, have come a long way. We have a well-defined marker panel. By markers, I mean features at the surface or in the cell that the pathologist, whether it being a dermatologist or a pathologist per se, sees under the microscope with special staining procedures. And then the diagnosis is rather straightforward once you have this typical marker pattern established in your tissue section. However, the bigger challenge is that your general practitioner, your hematologist, your dermatologist, as usually the first person who is confronted with patients with the suspicion of BPDCN, that these professionals think of it. Once you think of BPDCN, then it's rather easy and doesn't take much time to have the diagnosis established. The longest time it takes usually to think of BPDCN, and that's where we are having these awareness programs. Next slide, please. BPDCN per se is rapidly growing and spreading. That's what we call aggressive disease. So it progresses rather quickly. And what affects the prognosis of a patient is not so much single molecular markers in the tumor. Our knowledge today basically says that age, your general condition, your health status, meaning other diagnoses that limit your general performance or you handling any systemic therapies, they limit or determine the overall outcome in the next foreseeable future. And therefore, we say age, general condition, comorbidities, they determine the prognosis and, of course, disease extent. That in turn means once you have a suspicious skin lesion that doesn't disappear and your dermatologist is consulted, the earlier the diagnosis is made, the better. The treatment used to be polychemotherapy adapted to your age and fitness. Nowadays, we have a targeted therapeutic option with approval status in the US and in the EU or in Europe, a targeted therapy against CD123, a surface protein that delivers a cytotoxic payload then being internalized into the cell and cells being killed in a rather targeted way. To actually cure patients, you have to have a subsequent stem cell transplantation, predominantly allogeneic, but also autologous is possible to have long-term disease control / cure. So in order to positively affect your prognosis once you have been exposed to the potential of having BPDCN is early diagnosis, meaning not spending much time in this diagnostic loop at the dermatologist or hematologist, and of course get yourself involved with a center that has experience with BPDCN. Reach out to networks like this to find experts and get yourself included in a registry or in a clinical trial if available to be closer and better monitored and to have access to modern and efficient therapies. With this, I would like to conclude my general introductory part and hand over to you, Antonella, for the next item.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Erling, for this comprehensive explanation of what BPDCN is and how it affects patients. So now I would like to give the floor to Ivano Fonseca, who is a patient of BPDCN. So he's Italian and he doesn't feel comfortable to speak in English. So we have activated a live translated captions that you need to enable on your laptop, on your computer. So you at the bottom of your screen, you should see an option marked captions. Where you will be prompted to choose your speaking language and your caption language.
Sì.
So I hope you are on that. So now I give the floor to Ivano. So he will bring a patient touch, a human touch to this conversation, and he will explain how it is to be diagnosed with BPDCN and the true experience of what it takes to be diagnosed and then treated of a rare disease. So Ivano, over to you. Ivano, puoi parlare.
Ok, grazie e saluto tutti quanti e grazie intanto per avermi invitato a questo incontro. Spero di potervi, con la mia esperienza, dare qualche notizia positiva e anche di coraggio. Se questa malattia è rarissima, io nella mia esperienza, sono ancora di più raro, perché nel mio caso, intanto è comparsa all'età di 47 anni, senza alcuna manifestazione sulla pelle. Ehm, e poi ancora rarità nella rarità, dopo poco tempo anche un mio cugino che è collegato con noi, che saluto, dalla Germania, Maurizio, e anche lui ha avuto la mia stessa patologia. Quindi siamo veramente una rarità nella rarità. Ehm, Devo dire che io ero donatore di sangue, quindi ho fatto la mia donazione nel dicembre del 2019 e dopo 6-7 mesi mi sentivo di colore giallo negli occhi. Ehm, Mi sono incontrato casualmente col medico di base che mi ha detto che dovevo andare subito al pronto soccorso, ma io pensavo, mi sentivo bene, quindi non ci ho dato molto peso. Poi però lui, mi sono ricordato che è stato molto insistente e quindi mi ci sono recato. E una volta lì non sono più tornato a casa per un po' di tempo. E devo dire che sono stato molto fortunato perché l'ematologo che mi ha preso subito in carico, che era a fine carriera, adesso è in pensione, ma è stato molto bravo perché ha individuato subito quella che poteva essere la mia malattia. Eh, e infatti nel giro di pochi giorni, e devo dire che da quando sono andato al pronto soccorso, nel giro di 10 giorni, la malattia mi è stata diagnosticata con certezza e anche su questo sono stato molto fortunato, visto anche quello che ha detto il dottore, che è la difficoltà appunto di identificarla e subito. Sono stato subito trasferito all'ospedale Sant'Orsola di Bologna, lì sono stato appunto messo nelle cure di queste persone fantastiche che ringrazio veramente dal profondo del mio cuore. Ehm, quindi sono stato subito informato della possibilità di essere curato con un farmaco sperimentale che veniva dagli Stati Uniti, dove, dove appunto aveva dato degli ottimi risultati. Il suo nome è Tagraxofusp, il nome commerciale è il Zonris, e mi fu appunto spiegato che appunto questo farmaco in alternativa alla chemio era una terapia mirata e che agiva appunto contro l'antigene CD123, mi fu spiegato, ed evitava l'utilizzo della chemioterapia che, come risaputo, colpisce un po' sia ciò che è cattivo, ciò che è buono. Io sono stato ben felice di apprendere dell'esistenza di questo farmaco, anche se le controindicazioni erano molto pesanti, cioè il rischio nell'utilizzo di questo farmaco, mi fu detto, era altissimo, ma molto alta era la probabilità anche di non farcela. Quindi mettendo sul piatto delle bilance queste due considerazioni, io sono stato comunque portato a fidarmi della scienza, della ricerca, e quindi ho accettato di sperimentare questo farmaco. Devo dire che la prima volta non è andata molto bene, abbiamo dovuto sospendere, ma io insistevo con i medici e, e quindi abbiamo dovuto sospendere perché le controindicazioni appunto potevano portare anche a situazioni di una certa gravità. Io riuscii a convincere i medici di tentare una seconda volta, e la seconda volta invece sono riuscito a terminare tutta la procedura e quindi il farmaco ha funzionato, tant'è che ha quasi del tutto debellato la malattia. Poi, continuando, ho anche fatto il trapianto per poter, diciamo, ottenere il miglior risultato e una guarigione con una certa percentuale, diciamo, di successo. Anche questo l'ho superata. Sono stato trapiantato sempre all'ospedale Sant'Orsola il 31 dicembre del 2020, quindi ho trascorso il mio capodanno in ospedale. Ricordo i miei familiari che sono venuti sotto la finestra dell'ospedale per farmi gli auguri. E a loro dedico anche questa mia presenza qui e il fatto, insomma, di essere qui a raccontarvi la mia esperienza. Mi è stato chiesto di dare qualche indicazione ai pazienti e lo faccio brevemente dicendo queste tre cose. Intanto non abbattersi. E sicuramente il fatto di conoscere che esistono persone che studiano, che ricercano e che in questo momento ringrazio, così come ringrazio i medici presenti e collegati per la loro attività. E quindi è importante non abbattersi, perché quello che fa la scienza, direi, per sottolineare il mio pensiero al 50%, l'altro 50% lo dobbiamo fare noi, con la nostra voglia di combattere.
I'm not sure if Ivano is frozen. Probably yes. So,
Eccomi,
ok,
eccomi.
ecco.
Dicevo, evitare di colpevolizzarsi, non starsi troppo a chiedere ma perché a me, ma perché... Beh, poi alla fine è meglio a me che ai miei figli. Non arrendersi, non arrendersi mai, non arrendersi mai e avere fiducia nella scienza e nel personale che ci cura. La prima lezione l'ho avuta in questa mia esperienza quando mi sono recato al pronto soccorso. Io ero seduto che ascoltavo la musica, mi avevano già fatto le analisi del sangue e attendevo gli esiti. A un certo punto vedo che spunta un infermiere con una carrozzina e lo vedo che si dirige verso di me. Ma io subito pensavo, io sto benissimo, non viene mica a prendere me. E invece è venuto a prendere me. E quando io l'ho visto che veniva con la carrozzina, ho subito capito che c'era qualcosa che non andava ed era anche serio. Io sinceramente ho detto no, io vengo con te e vengo con i miei piedi, andiamo pure dove dobbiamo andare. E invece lui ha insistito, dice no, ti devi sedere. E allora io mi sono seduto perché mi sono fidato di lui, se me lo diceva era perché era necessario seguire in quel momento quel suo consiglio. Ed è stata la prima lezione da paziente e che voglio dirvi anche a voi. Bisogna ascoltare, saper ascoltare chi ci cura, i dottori, gli infermieri, tutte le equip e avere fiducia di loro. E guardarli anche con occhio umano, perché se anche noi pazienti lo facciamo, loro automaticamente ci guarderanno anche loro con l'occhio umano, quello che appunto noi tutti desideriamo nel momento del bisogno. Io spero di non essere stato troppo lungo e vi ringrazio ancora.
Grazie, Ivano. So thank you, Ivano, for your availability to share your story with us. It's not always easy to open up yourself on a diagnosis that can be so disruptive in your life. So now we move on. We are running very late, not because of you, Ivano, but we are running very late. But now we have the video messages from three MEPs, members of the European Parliament. So I think it's worth watching them. So the first one is MEP Vytenis Andriukaitis.
Good afternoon, dear participants of the webinar. While I cannot join you today, I felt it important to send a video message to show my support in raising awareness of rare diseases, especially rare cancers, and in particular Blastic, Plasmacytoid, Dendritic cell Neoplasm, or BPDCN. Rare diseases, including rare cancers, collectively affect a significant portion of the European population. Many of us know someone affected by such diseases. Individuals affected by illnesses like BPDCN often face a difficult journey, including delays in diagnosis, limited treatment options, and a lack of specialized care. It is crucial that we recognize the challenges faced by these individuals and their families and to work to improve their quality of life. BPDCN is an aggressive type of blood cancer. Increased awareness of this rare disease is vital to ensure early diagnosis and timely access to appropriate treatment. Research into BPDCN is ongoing, and there have been promising developments in recent years. We must continue to support research efforts to find better treatments and ultimately a cure. I encourage everyone to learn more about BPDCN and rare diseases in general. This is why I happily support Cancer Patients Europe in their sensibility and awareness campaign on the matter. We have to use European reference networks, especially those dedicated to rare cancers, which offer a great European infrastructure that allow our clinicians and researchers to help the people suffering from rare diseases. Let us work together to support individuals and families affected by rare diseases and to ensure they have access to the care and support their needs. Thank you for your attention to this important issue. I wish you a good and productive rest of the webinar. Thank you.
So we thank MEP Andriukaitis, and now we have another video message from MEP Tomislav Sokol. And I saw that there are some questions in the chat. So if any of the panelists can start addressing them, that is fine. So we are, okay, it's coming.
Hello, my name is Tomislav Sokol. As someone who cares deeply about health equity and has worked with CPE in the past on cancer care issues, I'm happy to lend my voice to raise awareness for rare diseases, especially Blastic, Plasmacytoid, Dendritic cell Neoplasm, or BPDCN. BPDCN is a rare and aggressive form of blood cancer. Early diagnosis is critical, but it's often delayed due to a lack of awareness among both the public and healthcare professionals. This delay can have serious consequences for patients. Individuals with BPDCN and their families face many challenges, from navigating complex treatment options to coping with the emotional and financial burden of the disease. We must ensure they have access to the information, care, and support they need. By understanding rare diseases like BPDCN, we can make a real difference. I commend Cancer Patients Europe for their dedication to this cause. Let's join them in ensuring everyone has access to the care and support they deserve.
So we thank MEP Sokol, and now there is another video message. Just a curiosity. I mean, all the MEPs that responded to our call have something to do with health. They are, so Andrew Katis and Sokol are both medical doctors. And MEP Nicolas Gonzalez Casares, he's a nurse by profession. So also the video message for MEP Casares is on its way. Yes.
Rare diseases present unique challenges that demand our attention. My name is Nicolas Gonzalez Casares, and I am here to advocate for increased awareness and support for those affected by rare conditions, especially Blastic, Plasmacytoid, Dendritic cell neoplasm. Rare diseases like BPDCN often lack the attention and resources dedicated to more common conditions. This can lead to delays in diagnosis, limited treatment options, and a lack of specialized care. We need strong political action to address this challenge and improve the lives of those affected. Policies that support research, facilitate early diagnosis, and ensure access to affordable treatments are crucial. We need to invest in healthcare infrastructure that can meet the unique needs of rare diseases patients. This includes supporting organizations like Cancer Patients Europe, who are working tirelessly to raise awareness and advocate for those affected by BPDCN. Together, we can make a difference for better care and support for rare disease patients. I'm happy to be partnering now with CPE to bring more light to this condition.
So we are very grateful to those three MEPs because it's always important to make sure that our needs are shared with policymakers so that they understand what is needed and how they can support us. So now I open the floor for the panel discussion. So we have Dr. Herling and Dr. De Koning, who will, I mean, I already introduced them before, so now we can have an open discussion with them. I will ask you a few questions, but also we will take questions from the audience. So the first question for both of you is related to the treatment options. So, I mean, the patient community is really eager to know what are the most promising treatment options currently available for BPDCN and how do they work? So are there lots of side effects or long-term effects? So please, maybe Dr. De Koning, you can start.
Yes, thank you for inviting me to participate in this webinar. It was very interesting to hear about the patient story, which is a classical story of BPDCN if we are aware about it. Concerning your question is a real question. The real challenge now is not to diagnose BPDCN, because when we think about BPDCN, it's very easy to diagnose. And the real challenge remains the treatment. Today, with our knowledge, the sole treatment that can give a long-term survival for the patient is to have an access to a bone marrow transplantation. And what is important is to go to marrow transplantation with the less of effects, because marrow transplantation will work only if the patient is in good response.
Eric?
You're muted.
Classical chemotherapy is one way to obtain a remission, but it has, as you know, a lot of side effects. And as you see in BPDCN, the population of patients is quite old. And so standard chemotherapy, aggressive chemotherapy, is not sometimes suitable for these patients. The revolution in the treatment is targeted therapy, especially the CD123 monoclonal antibodies are directed against a specific marker of the BPDCN cells. It's a treatment that Ivano received, as he said to us. And this treatment is probably less toxic than standard chemotherapy. But it's also a treatment that has some side effects, especially fluid.
You're muted again, Eric.
Especially a side effect that can be very important is the retention of fluid with a weight gain and sometimes pulmonary edema and sometimes like that. And so it is important that this treatment can be administered in teams that are used with this treatment, and that could avoid the occurrence of the side effects. Marco, if you want to complete some things.
Yes, I think I'm glad that you said that you put the transplantation and the access to transplantation as the most central column of an efficient treatment of BPDCN, because then we don't have to discuss and argue so much about how to get there, because that is something where your doctor will also have, for sure, has access to the data that's out there, but might be insecure on the issue of what to give, whether to give the targeted version of the treatment with approval status, or whether to resort to polychemotherapy. But it is imperative that you know that the better the condition you are in, the better the transplant goes. And with better condition, I mean you should be in a complete remission of your disease, but also you should not have suffered toxicities, major toxicities during the treatment to bring you to the transplant. And therefore, we as physicians would always prefer a mild and efficient method to get to the transplant, and not so much the aggressive and efficient way to get to the transplant. And therefore, the major task should be to get to the transplant. And this is usually an allogeneic transplant, although there's emerging data that an autologous transplant might be as efficient. It might be efficient in some patients as well. But the question probably then is, well, what if I am 75 years old and transplant is not something for me? What if I'm not 30, 40, or 50? And of course, then it's more likely that cure is not an option, but life prolonging and quality of life improving, symptom release, reduction of tumor burden, and so on, is the primary therapy goal, which can be accomplished by the targeted tagraxofusp-based option or by mild chemotherapies. And I think one of your questions, Antonella, was how do they work? Quickly, the targeted version basically brings a cytotoxic, a cell poison to the cell via a very targeted way, via a receptor, because it is a fusion protein, antibody based, while the chemotherapy is pretty much less critical in terms of where it acts. It acts on fast dividing cells, which can be the tumor cells as well as normal tissue.
Okay, thank you, for this very comprehensive explanation of how best to treat BPDCN. And it was mentioned by Dr. De Koning, the need of working together, different professions are working together. So the need of a multidisciplinary approach. And also there is a question in the chat about the education of GPs. So maybe you can elaborate a bit more on the importance for BPDCN of multidisciplinary team work, but also the importance of GPs in addressing the patients to the right diagnostics. Who would like to start here?
Eric, do you want to start?
You're muted, Eric.
Yes, it is very important to collaborate, especially as you have seen that the disease generally started on the skin, and one of the great difficulty, even if I have a biased view of the disease because I am an hematologist, and so we see the patient when there is an emergency, when the disease has invaded the bone marrow, as that the hemoglobin goes down, the patient has an anemia, has a low platelets and some bleeding and some infectious complication. The patient presents like a leukemia. In all hematological centers in France, I think, because in France we have from 15 years ago, we have built a network of hematological laboratory, and in France, in my town, there is a reference laboratory to establish the diagnosis of BPDCN. So when a specialist in France thinks about BPDCN, they send us some samples, and then the clinician asks me, no, you have confirmed the diagnosis, and how can I treat this patient? I think it is very important. And I am now working with also some Italian and some German colleagues to try to build a European registry to collect all the cases of the patient. And as the politician says in their videos, we have a support for that from the ERN platform of Europe, and I think it is very important, and also the implication of the patients and the knowledge, the use of social media is important to diffuse the information.
Thank you. This is very important. We normally, as Cancer Patients Europe, we advocate for the importance of having registries and the European registries, not just country registries that work in isolation. So this is something very relevant and very important. Thank you for bringing this up today. And maybe Mark, Dr. Helling, you can also tell us a bit more about the importance of clinical trials, because we also heard from Ivano, from the patient, the importance of accessing a treatment even when it's not 100% sure yet that is beneficial.
Yes. I think on general terms, BPDCN is pretty much a disease that holds up the mirror towards us in academia and presents to be a model how good we are in dealing with rare diseases, how to give patients access to diseases that are not that frequently seen, and that where pharmaceutical companies might lack interest because there's no major market, right? So academia is pretty much called upon the stage to encourage the corporate sector, pharmaceutical companies, to do this together with them. And in BPDCN, I think we have been successful in that kind of partnership because I think I'm allowed to say that Stemline Mina really pushes awareness and initiatives that raise awareness at the side of professionals and patients. And also amongst us in academia, there is no false sense of competition, whether you are being from Germany, Italy, or France. You basically we have understood now that you can only make major advances by having joint pan-European registries, by actually having recruiting into international clinical trials. And that is, for the patient, I think, the only access to get to, or the possibility to get access towards a drug that is not marketed yet. And the example of tagraxofusp and its early access program, where as a patient and a physician you could get access towards or to tagraxofusp before it was marketed. And examples like these are important so that patients can benefit from such a treatment before it is approved and marketed in Europe or before it was in the US. So clinical trials become more and more costly and are harder to do. Not so much for lack of us not having ideas what can be efficient. I think we have pretty well thought through strategies on how to treat BPDCN, but there's just not enough sometimes resources, finances, and patience in that regard to test an efficient therapy. So we have to resort to preclinical models, cell lines, there's no mice, in order to figure out what is the best option, which company, which financing source is able to do this with us. And then it has to be international, by my understanding. Otherwise, you don't recruit fast enough so that many patients can benefit from the results. There's no use in recruiting a trial to get the statistically needed number if the trial takes 15 or 10 years. Then you're not really working for the benefit of many patients because it's just taking too long. So you have to be fast in terms of talking about 2 to 5 years recruiting in a trial so that the results are out there quickly for the benefit of the patients. So yes, consult a large volume academic center whether they have clinical trials open for BPDCN. And if not, at least the registry that your country takes part in is an option to help yourself and others. I stop here and maybe there's some more questions in the chat.
Yeah. Thank you. I mean, this is very interesting, and it's very important that you mentioned that clinical trials need to be implemented in a shorter period of time. Something that we always advocate for is accelerate access to innovative treatment, and often clinical trials are the only hope for patients. So also international or cross-border clinical trials are fundamental for certain cancer types. So now, thank you to both Dr. Herrling and Dr. De Koning for your contributions. And now I give the floor to Dr. Juan Ventura, who is Cancer Patients Europe Research and Patient Engagement Director. He will present our project, the work that we are doing currently as a CPE CPE on BPDCN and our commitment and how we aim at supporting those affected by the disease. So Juan, the floor to you. You really have a few minutes.
Thank you, Antonella. I will go quickly. Just basically, as cancer patients in Europe, we are very much concerned for inequalities in the EU and in Europe in general. And one of the inequalities is those patients with rare diseases, because they are, as in this case with BPDCN, difficult to diagnose, and sometimes they don't have alternative treatments. What we're trying to do for BPDCN is to create awareness, to give educational material for all the stakeholders involved, for the clinicians to have an idea that to follow very easy protocols they can achieve a quick diagnosis that may mean a lot of difference for the patient, for the patients themselves, to being able to detect some of these signs that are not very specific, but they can give a hint about there is something going on that is not just related to skin problems. And as, again, for policymakers, because they can make a difference at the time of the promoting the research, giving funds for clinical trials, and of course contribute for the quick approval for the reimbursement for all these new medication that can also help these patients. For us, we are launching with this together with this webinar that is part of the different actions that we're doing, a fact sheet, giving some hints about what is the disease, and that can help probably hopefully all these stakeholders. So thank you for being with us, and we will maintain our support for these rare diseases. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Juan. So thank you for sticking with the time. I would also like, yes, you can see on the slides here the samples of the materials that we have produced. So I would really like to encourage you to visit the Cancer Patients Europe website for more information on the BPDCN and to connect with our community. So please share your thoughts and experiences on social media using the hashtag BPDCN awareness, and you know that together we can make the difference and help those affected by rare diseases. So I would like to thank everybody. So definitely the speakers who accepted our invitation to help us in disseminating the information on BPDCN. We actually thank the panelists today also for being part of our project on BPDCN. They are part of the advisory board of the project, and so they are really committed to work hand in hand with patients in order to address BPDCN and save as many lives as possible. I would also like to thank the participants, so all of you for taking part in the webinar and for your questions. We are also available to take any further question via email if you come up with any doubt or any question that you need to know. I would also like to thank the CPE team. I mean, Joanna Kokalari, Tristan Hansen, and Kaustub Durandar for making this webinar possible. And of course, Menarini Stemline was mentioned before. Menarini Stemline is helping us in this journey. So thank you, everyone, and I wish you a good continuation of the evening.